go ahead and get started. On record here, we get our Belfair sewer plan proposals briefings underway on February 28th. We'll go around and state our names for the record, and then get started. Kevin Sheedy.
Terry Jeffries.
Jennifer Byron, Melissa Please.
Please. Buckle, Tony.
Leo Kim.
Jerry Edenrode.
Bart Stepp.
Lisa Frayer.
Jeff Shue.
Dave Wendell.
Jerry House.
Frank Pinter.
Randy Nebula.
Okay, very good. Okay, Frank, well.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start off with a PowerPoint presentation to begin a conversation around the purpose of today's briefing, which is to facilitate a conversation around developing an updated financial plan for the Belfair sewer and to incorporate it into the financial plans for all the utilities. So basically the problem is, or part of the problem is, continued state auditors finding. Again in 2015, the Belfair sewer and in addition to that, the Russellwood Sewer Fund's financial conditions put the utilities at risk of not being able to meet their financial obligations. These are this was the finding from the state auditor's office. A little history, just a brief history. The Belfair sewer utility began operations in 2012, charging customers $96 a month for each equivalent resident unit. That's an ERU. The project was financed through loans issued by the Department of Ecology and the General Obligation Bond. At the end of 2015, the Belfair Sewer Fund had about $11.5 million in outstanding debt. Back to the state auditor's findings, the Belfair Sewer has not generated enough revenues to pay back the debt. Mason County used REIT 2 and 09 sales tax proceeds to help make debt payments. Without the support of this money, the Belfair Sewer Fund would have had an estimated shortfall of about $475,000 at the end of 2015. The state auditor's comments are relevant to their audit of the 2015 financials. So 2016 is not referenced here, although 2016 would have had about the same financial shortfall had we not supplemented the revenue in Belfair with REIT 2 and 09 sales tax funds. The county created a financial plan in 2015 to improve Belfair Sewer's financial condition. This plan included expanding the number of customers in 2018 to make the system self-sustaining. But the county has not been able to begin this phased expansion due to lack of funds for construction. The county also brought in less rate revenue, loan repayments, and hookup fees in fiscal year 2015 than originally forecast. Our conversation in regards to forecast versus budget versus actual are separate things. So we forecasted as a function of the plan numbers higher than what were budgeted for revenue, and then what we actually received in revenue.
Okay.
Therefore, the financial plan that was created is no longer accurate, and the plan has not been adjusted to forecast actual activity and to reflect hookup fee reductions, bad debt, and slow ERU payments. Cash on hand was sufficient to cover only 15 days of operating costs, a decrease of 2 days from fiscal year 2014. The state auditor's best practice is about 90 days of operating cash available for well-reserved funds for any fund that has a O&M component to it. The current ratio was 0.36, meaning there were more current liabilities than current assets at the end of the year. The ratio was a decrease of 54% in 2015, meaning that they ended up owing more money than they had assets. And that increased between the year of 2014 and 15. I don't know what it's going to do for 16. I haven't done the analysis yet, projected analysis. Again, the auditor's comments, unrestricted net assets were negative $841,887. Income before transfers has been negative for the past 5 years with a loss of $1.1 million in 2015. Operating revenues have not been sufficient to make annual debt payments on the sewer system project. Just generally, very poor economic conditions fiscally for Belfair Sewer, in that its operating revenues are not sufficient to cover long-term debt service payments. The auditor also had a audit finding in regards to the Russellwood Sewer. Russellwood Sewer utility began operations in the early 70s, charging customers $96 per month, currently charging customers $96 per month for each ERU. The project was financed through loans issued again by the Department of Ecology and a general obligation bond. At the end of 2015, the sewer fund had about $1.3 million in outstanding debt. The county was not aware of Russellwood Sewer declining financial condition until after fiscal year 2015 had ended. There was no monitoring or financial plan for the sewer system's financial position to ensure the aging system would be able to continue. Again, these are still auditor's comments. Cash on hand was sufficient to cover operating costs for only 15 days in 2015, a significant decrease from 107 days in 2014. The current ratio decreased from 3.09 in 14 to 1.32. If the ratio continues to decrease at the same rate, the fund will have more current liabilities than assets in 2016. That's similar to what occurred to the Belfair. Its net current ratio continued to decrease since its inception. Unrestricted net assets were negative $303,562. Income before transfers has been negative for the past 5 years, with a loss of $103,194 in 2015.
Where are we transferring from?
REIT.
The Russellwood to?
There was a $60,000 transfer budgeted for in 16. I'm not sure we had one budgeted in 15.
There was a 60,000, 16 from me?
From REIT 2, I believe from REIT 2? Yeah. So the original 2015 sewer financial plan projections and assumptions. These were the projections that were put together to develop the 2015 plan. The then current hookups were 406 ERUs. ERU rate, we were to set the ERU rate at $99 till 2026, 10-year period, then up to 115 and increase at a rate of 2.5%. CFCs, those are the hookup fees, were scheduled to be at $10.2 thousand in 2015, $13,000 in 16, and $16.3 in 17. I believe that's what's in current code. O&M costs at that time per ERU were $400,000 annually. I'm sorry, the current cost at the then current ERUs.
I was gonna say.
406 was around $400,000 annually with a 3, and the projection was for a 3% increase. Long-term general obligations and the state revolving fund debt was at around $12 million, with debt service around $737,724 a year, increasing by $250,000 in 2017. The ERU growth rate for the Belfair UGA was projected to be at 2%. The revenue rate increase was projected to be at 2.5%. And the CFC, the CHP repayment program, those were the loans the county made to citizens to cover their hookup fees, were expected to be at a repayment of about 85%. So those were the base assumptions around the Belfair plan.
Okay, Frank, just one
Sure.
second. So, are we anywhere near that 85%?
As far as total repayment, no. I was going over the
the hookup tally, the spreadsheet Jennifer had just before lunch. And surprisingly enough, there were very few that hadn't made payment. Many have paid it off, and almost all of them are paying towards their loan amount. But no, as far as having 85% paid off, not even close, I don't think.
Please explain to the commissioner one of the downfalls of this particular loan and what happened with the paperwork.
There wasn't any. So one of the issues of the, that in our audits we've come across is the fact that these citizens to whom we lent money to never, in some cases, never signed a loan document. So some of those have been difficult to convince that they should pay on a debt that they haven't signed a loan document with. However,
We're
your
going
sense
back
is that
after all.
we're gonna go back after them and try to still collect on it, to include names if necessary.
Yes, if we need to. Again, looking at the spreadsheet, it appears that most of the folks out there have been making some effort to pay.
One of the problems that occurred, Commissioner, is the contractor that they hired was supposed to go out to collect the paperwork and the signatures, and apparently didn't collect them and didn't get them, so nobody has copies they can go after.
We're gonna provide copies to them and ask them to execute it, you know, or put them on, with your concurrence, put them on notice that we're gonna file a lien against their property for the amount owed.
So the previous page was the assumptions around which the plan was being developed and designed. Here is the plan as it was proposed. Maintain ERU costs at $96 for 10 years, and I think that's really $99 is what it should have been, but 96, I think we're currently at $96.
Yes, that's correct.
But the plan was to keep it at $99 flat for 10 years. Reduce the hookup fees to $5,000 in 15, 16, 17. Then in 18, increase the hookup fees up to $10,000. And then every year after that, increase that by another $1,000 up until 2026.
And so do we have, who is still, we know who should be hooking into this and it hasn't yet? I mean, do we have that identified? So like, you know, we have these hookup fees. I mean, is it fixed, this area where they can be hooking into this, that people just haven't?
It's fixed based on the pipes that are in the ground, and I have a schematic of that, and we can discuss that when we get to the schematic. I think your question is, are there any hookups that should be hooked up that are not hooked up? And I don't believe so.
I don't know, Commissioner, do you have a sense for that?
Rite Aid is hooking up. There's other ones that are tearing down, so I know one that paid their actual fee, still tearing down. I know there was one up in Byerly Drive, but I don't know whatever happened on that one.
So most of them have hooked up within this initial service boundary.
Yeah, there are maybe single ones here and there
But now,
that,
we've lost
still in
ERUs, and we
question.
know why we lost ERUs.
actually, last count we have, it's up to 416 ERUs total.
But we're down to 200 and...
So we may have lost
Customers,
customers.
yeah.
That might be the case. I didn't look at it from that perspective. That's actually a good.
Well, I could not see how we would make up ERUs, because some of them had to be redone because how many gallons of water they were taking in. So they may have increased how many ERUs they were using.
So that was the hookup fee configuration that was part of the plan. The other part of the plan was to expand into the old Belfair Highway phase in 2017. That's the old phase 2. And then expand into the southern phase in 2026. And expand into the Newkirk phase, that's the one where the bypass is, as the bypass became operational. Plan also incorporated.
It's not the bypass.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I don't know how the nomenclature got to be that way.
Yeah.
But the sequence that he's identified is correct.
Okay, the sequence, as I say, but the two aren't on each other. Just
Those
so
were,
you know.
that was the sequence.
Okay.
how we came up with the Newkirk Southern, those names were defined as part of the process, actually a couple of years ago, it was modified. So the plan also said to supplement the sewer with $450 from the '09 sales tax until 2029, and $150 from REIT 2 till 2024. Problem with the plan was it was never implemented. We didn't do any follow-up review of the status, and we didn't push that review status onto some of the other utilities. So since 2015, projections on cash flow at end of the year for 2016, this was back in beginning of 2015, cash flow projections based on the plan were to have cash of about 1.2 million at the end of the year in 2016. The actual cash at the end of the year in 2016 was negative $9,254. Construction for expansion cannot occur until 2019. 600,000 in construction retention payments were not in the plan. They were identified as being available in a separate fund that
We were given bad information.
truly was part of the original, was part of the ending fund balance. Then there were 600,000 in additional closeout construction costs not in the plan. And the ERU growth rate at 416 today is really only a 1% annual growth rate, not as projected, or 2%.
So the construction for expansion bullet, why is that? Is that just because of lack of?
We're currently in the process of going to the Department of Ecology to get loans to do the design work for the
Okay, so
expansion.
that's a lack of capital that we have on our side that's preventing that, right? The
Basically,
construction
yes.
okay.
Basically.
There's not something in our code or agreements or whatever, that's just
It's-
kind of a reality,
Yes.
having cash, okay.
So the next bullet is specifically to that point. A proposed loan offer from DOE was recently offered for design plans. That was for $1.5 million is total.
I think you're correct.
And that they were offering a loan of
Forgivable loan is where we currently are for half of the 750,000.
half of the 1.5, which is 750,000. So we would still need to come up with our
750.
component of 750,000.
They offered us half, or are we
The,
stating that? 'Cause I don't.
the design, and to be real candid with you, this has gone back in because we were able to kind of refute the median income out
Yes.
there and provide them with more information. So I haven't seen the revised proposal list, but the initial configuration was they would provide 50% funding in the context of a loan for our 1.5. So that would leave us with 750,000 and 750,000 for a loan.
In a loan, not in the grant.
And they've come back with this revised median income, and they're talking about half of that, I believe, half of the 750 being forgivable.
So 25% forgivable overall.
Based on my understanding today, Commissioner. And again, we had discussions with them this morning. The discussions, I think, were productive, but they were steering us another direction on the SKIA piece and stuff like that. We can't use this money for that element. They won't let us interchange projects like that. But yeah, that's the best I can give you as far as my understanding of
Well, you
it.
brought it up from where it was, so they did listen to your new information.
Yeah.
So again, 750 is the county's match.
That's correct.
375 is a forgivable loan,
Apparently, yes,
and 375 will be a loan.
yes.
Okay, and that's for the 1.5 million to do design work
Yes,
on the next phase.
Well, that would be specifically that old Belfair Highway piece.
Again, results since 2015, technically our O&M costs are slightly lower than projected, which is a good thing, but it's a bad thing. Part of it has to do with the fact that our staffing is very limited, and that's why O&M costs are slightly lower than what were projected. With the staffing going back up, as well as the cost of the staffing being commensurate with the marketplace, the sense is that O&M costs are going to be higher than what we had been projecting. So there may be a blip on the low side, but going forward, we're going to have to reset the baseline for O&M costs because it's going to be a new baseline for O&M. The lawsuit with Boss Construction has been settled for $1.2 million and funded with an internal bond payable back to current expense. Timely payment of ERUs are eroding. Jerry and I are kind of having a conversation around how much, if that's occurring. And we'll kind of come back to the commission and define whether they are, and if so, how much. Repayments of the CHPs are being pursued, and the growth in Belfair ERUs, albeit there was some minor, is non-existent, and I put forward a question in regards to whether or not we truly do have a moratorium. So with that question, David has done some research to identify
So, if you
what is, quote, a moratorium, if there is a, quote,
right, so
moratorium.
the way, and here's where some of the confusion has come from. We have on our website, we have development code under the community development portion of the website that refers to the Belfair UGA. In a separate part, under Muni Code, we have a different version that refers to the Belfair UGA, which has the holding tank portion that the other portion does not have. So that's where confusion comes. We have two different things that should be aligned and they're not aligned. And I didn't find that until yesterday. So we've got a plan for working on that. Holding tanks are authorized by ordinance in 2012. Since that time, we've only had 2 requests for holding tanks. Part of the issue is holding tanks are only good for about a week before pump out's needed, and we don't have any way to pump out. So another part of the moratorium, it's not a moratorium, but the part of non-growth is that a lot of the parcels that are left are within buffer zones, and there's a number of issues that physically, by code or by setbacks, prevents development in some areas of the lower part of the UGA.
We'll approach that when we get to the schematics of the UGA and what sections are currently hooked up. So we'll address that in just a few minutes.
There is legislation pending in the legislature right now, I'm not sure what point it's at, that will allow on-site septic inside the UGAs with a binding site plan that states that once sewer is available within 500 feet, they would disconnect and connect to the sewer. There are other UGAs that have no sewer in them. So it's not an impossibility to do. And I did talk to Commerce about it, and Commerce said, you're right, it is possible to do. You have to have an approved design, so I'd have to go through the whole design process, and then a binding site plan. What's that?
Approved design of what?
Of septic system.
Approved septic system design,
Right.
not a sewer system.
Not a sewer system. Approved septic system design. In order to put septic in, we could do it with an approved design in areas where it was feasible to do, and a binding site plan, and that would have to be referenced not only in ordinance, but also in the comp plan.
Something to share with you is, that was one of the biggest problems, not being able to build unless you, because at first they didn't even allow for those holding tanks, but the holding tanks was a worthless concept. It was just meant to throw everybody off at the time, make it seem like we had something. Being able to use the septic system, they in Olympia, in the urban growth area, have areas where they're still putting in septics. at least they did several years ago, we went through all this. They're still putting in septic because there is no sewer. It was at the county level we weren't allowing it. Is there some way you can find a way to help us? Well, I know you already, we had the discussion, I know you already are. We need to be able to change that here at the county level so that they can, because then we would be able to get some growth down the Old Belfair Highway and other areas. If they
Yeah, I
actually
think we
go.
need to address it, take it to the, write the ordinance. So it'd be a companion piece of ordinance, and there have to be a development piece to go in the development regs and comp plan as well. Take it to the PAC, run it through the process.
Which would be to eliminate the holding tank concept and go back to, you can put in a septic, but once the pipe comes up to you, you will need to then hook up to the sewer pipe.
And that was part of the original plan, was that they had to have the hardware already in place if they built a new home. They had to build it with the idea that all the infrastructure was there, so if the sewer came by, they'd have to be able to hook up, and it would already be built into their building code.
One thing the code does say in both is that you can't do subdivision without the infrastructure.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make any other allowances on that. The
Yeah.
infrastructure has to get there for subdivision.
So just got done reading the compliance orders and the findings of the 2005 appeal of the county's comprehensive plan update. And so the question of, Olympia's got septics, the building was septic, other UJs don't have any septic. This particular finding said, by allowing septics, you are not meeting the, especially if you don't require the hookup to, or the piping, so when the sewer comes by, you'll be hooked up. This growth management hearing board decision said that if you're not, at least, I'm thinking if you require at least that they have the pipe going out to the future pipe,
The infrastructure.
then you would be in compliance with the Growth Management Act. Without that, you're not in compliance.
And I think we even had a piece with the CSCs were accounted for in the permitting process of doing the onsite septic. You'd have to pay your CFC up front.
Which would be your hookup
Your
fee,
hookup fee to
so
the
that
sewer.
your pipe would be there in the ground. So as the pipe came by, it would automatically
Right.
hook right up.
I've been reading those hearing board findings also, and it was identified in there that sewer service was a premise of an urban area. It was assumed that you had to have that, and the expectation was that you were going to build to urban densities, which kind of preclude on-site septic systems. So there, I saw some concerns in that as I read it, wondering how we might proceed with this. As you're coming up with another proposal, how do we get that back in front of the hearings board for their consideration?
Do we have to? See, I haven't seen this in years. Was that actually a ruling, or was it a recommendation in order to avoid the
It was
next
a
phase?
ruling on
No,
our
it was a
stuff.
ruling,
It
and
was.
then the county went back in, I think, 2009 to seek compliance with the finding. And that's where they said we still didn't have the requirement that the binding site plan have the infrastructure in place, regardless of the sewer going by. And they put a lot of emphasis on our capital facilities plans needing to have how we funding, at least in the 6 years, the full build out of the sewer.
Good job, you send that to me. Been looking for a while, you did good. Thanks.
It's delightful reading. You'll
Yeah, I
enjoy it.
Yeah.
So previous decisions. Back in March of 2015, we had a similar presentation in regards to the sewer's financial risk resolution.
That's cute.
That was, wow, that was cute. That was the old PowerPoint from 2015. So to recall back, we had developed the Belfair Sewer Advisory Committee back in June of 2014, and it came forward with a number of suggestions, recommendations, and options which were identified in that presentation. But the base assumptions that we used at that time were what we identified previously. We had funding options, which was to use the 09 and REIT 2. We also talked about implementing a ULID, and then we also talked about internally funding bond purchases. Those internally funded bonds were going to put seed funding to add phases 2, 3, and 4. which is the Old Belfair, Southern, and the Newkirk. We were going to finance the boss settlement, which we did, and then refinance loan number 17, that's the Department of Ecology loan. So the task force said their proposals were to add phases 2, 3, and 4 with internal bond funding, add $275,000 to the 09 funding and REIT 2 funding, hold rates for 10 years at $99, add a ULID or alternative repayment program similar to the one from State Bill 5795, the assessment reimbursement area. Those were, that was a bill in I believe it was passed in 2015, that allowed the county to develop a assessment reimbursement area for latecomer agreements, pay for the financing of the sewer loan spur, and then collect the funding back from the latecomers or the person doing the developing. Revise the hookup fee schedule to entice early hookup. And that again was the reduction in costs of the hookup fee to the $5,000 rather than the $10,300. The Belfair Advisory Task Force also recommended refinancing of loan 17. That was the highest interest rate loan from the Department of Ecology. And then at that point in time, we were looking at about a $2 million boss settlement payment and how we were going to finance that. So, and this goes to the conversation that Jerry, or actually David, had started, which was how much of Belfair is still left to be developed. Loretta was very gracious in putting some information together based on her stormwater analysis data that it was stormwater, wasn't it? Yes. Data that they collected for a different project. But it basically said that 36% of total acreage is left to develop in Belfair.
In the entire UGA.
Correct. 41% of the acreage is already developed, and 23% is assumed not to be developed due to code constraints.
Let me ask a question on that. Would we gain any of that, is Loretta back there, I just can't see her.
Yeah.
Would we gain any of that if we were to change to the, that proposal you brought in to use the manual, to change our stormwater manual?
Slightly. I
Not
think that-
not much?
No, I think the biggest constraints are our buffers around wetlands and stream types, steep slopes, and Frank may hit on it later.
Yeah,
but
I will actually, it's right there. This is, the development limiting factors include things like lack of road access, water supply, terrain, steep slopes, riparian buffers, wetlands, and floodplains. Here's how it breaks out in the different phases. So the total acreage of developable is 36%. In the initial connection phase, there's only 17% left to develop. In the old Belfair Highway, there's 13% that can be developed. Now, no sewer is currently in the old Belfair. So the amount developed and the developable would be the total available utilization of a sewer line. In the Newkirk, 60% is developable, and in the southern regions, 59, in the southern is 60%. But this takes that information and breaks it down phase by phase, which is what Loretta was able to.
Again, though, a little confusion. Newkirk is down the Old Belfair Highway, so I'm confused on that.
The phase that is called Old Belfair Highway is phase 2. That is Newkirk.
Yeah, so that's the Old Belfair Highway and Newkirk.
But that's what they called that phase when they changed the names. Correct me if I'm wrong
From
here.
phase 2 to.
They changed the
Old
names
Belfair
from
Highway.
phase 2 to Old Belfair
So then
Highway.
what's Newkirk? Phase 3?
bypass.
The bypass.
bypass, the northern piece of the
Industrial area.
bypass.
Above
The
railroad
southern
track.
piece
So,
of the bypass
It's
is
just
southern.
whoever named it wrong. But that refers to the Belfair bypass area.
The northern
With the
portion.
exception of the commercial and industrial area around Bog Yard Road.
So that's what I'm wondering what that area is called.
That could be part of Newkirk, I can
It's
see
in
that.
That is what, the northern part of the bypass is the Newkirk.
It
These-
includes
Oh,
that
okay.
Yeah,
industrial
and the
area.
southern part of the bypass is the southern.
There's an old right of way that would allow them to go through that. That's been fought.
But that is how they came,
That-
that
that's
is
how
what they
it's
named
said.
it. I don't know who named
And
it.
southern is what?
I'll have a diagram, and that'll show all of those.
Southern developable, that's acres, right?
Correct, these are acreages.
I want to point out that as I looked at this and looked at the area that you're going to see in a minute, that's got constraints right now. A lot of that is already developed. And that's because the houses were built back when we didn't have wetland setbacks and stuff like that. So you're going to see a lot of area and you're going to want to question it, but in reality, it just predated our current regulations.
When you say it's developed, it's not developed, not necessarily developed at the total densities allowed.
No, but
Just means there's
you'll
a
know
house sitting
there's a
on
single-family
2
residence on
acres
it
or
or whatever, yeah.
Correct. And it's been grandfathered since before time.
But it can be redeveloped too.
Mhm.
Let's see.
So the Belfair sewer plant options today are to implement the old Belfair Highway phase as originally planned. That's a $7 million cost. Modify the expansion into the old Belfair Highway phase following Roy Bode Road. And there'll be a map coming up here shortly. That's about 3.7 million. Expand the UGA with the ULID to capture additional ERU potential. Or shrink the UGA, which has been a conversation that has been brought up a few times. Additionally, we can refinance the Department of Ecology debt to longer terms. Or although,
Just where you want me to chime in?
go for it.
Like
And I spoke to
said,
Jeff about it this afternoon as well, before we talked.
The financial officer at Ecology called me this morning. We talked about specifically the loan offer that's coming up, but also the meeting you had last week down there and
With Senator-
opportunities.
Senator Sheldon.
Yes. He was skeptical that we were gonna be able to get the existing loans refinanced through Ecology for a longer period or lower rates or whatever. But he indicated that, as we got to talking about the SKIA area and providing that, he says if you can get RD funds for construction on that, USDA RD funds will also then allow you to borrow against other related improvements. So, and they will stretch it out for a 40-year time frame. So if we can get a USDA RD loan for the connection to SKIA, because of the affiliation with the plant, he thought we could probably pull that back in and refinance that whole thing as a package.
Refinance everything together with that.
Under the Rural
But
Development
that would still need to be
USDA.
taking on a whole new debt.
Yes.
Correct. You would have to expand before you can do that.
But it's one thing to expand and have it come through capital financing from the state, another to expand with us building and paying for it for the city of Bremerton and the port properties. That's a whole different thing. I know I've never had that conversation of us paying to build it. Be up to all the commission to talk about, but I don't know how we could handle another $15 million total probably with everything, or
It's not quite 15, but,
12.
yeah,
for everything.
I think we have that in the next slide here.
Okay.
So, Department of Ecology is somewhat backpedaling on their offer to do a refinancing of their debt, their own refinancing of their debt.
And I want to share with the commission, we've been through that before. you and I
Yeah,
did with
yes.
And they, I had explained to us before, regardless of what was said in Senator Shelby's office, that they don't do that.
They've said they don't do that in prior conversations. That's why I was so surprised when we had that conversation from them at that time last week. So we could also refinance the Department of Ecology debt through long-term general obligation bonds for the county. We can continue to use REIT 2 and 09 sales tax to supplement the revenue for debt service. We can revise the hookup fee schedule as proposed in the previous plan to entice early hookup. We should review the ERU rates and is $96 or $99 sustainable, and for how long, given the current state of affairs. Extend the main sewer line to Port of Bremerton, the PSIC or the SKIA. That would be about 140 ERUs at a cost of about $7.5 million, which would bring in a revenue of about $168,000 a year. The $168,000 revenue would not be offset in a material way with additional operating costs, minor, because we have the staff currently that would take, that we could absorb this amount of activity in. Without increasing staff, there would be some materials and maybe some supplies, some testing costs and things like that that would go up, but it wouldn't be too material.
Did you say that was net revenue?
That was gross.
So we also have the.
Now, the debt service is not considered in there yet because there are too many variables. How much of it is going to be matched, how much of it is coming from DOE, how much of what the rates are, what the terms are. So there's way too many variables to be able to come to a net.
When we did our calculations, we take into account all the things that we'd be looking at, right-of-way purchases, environmental easements and issues like that.
I think we've got
Right.
pretty good planning estimates. The alignment that we would probably, well, what we're looking at and think it's the best would be along both the bypass and then SR3. So it'd just be a franchise agreement with WashDOT to go along there. So we wouldn't need right-of-way.
So SR3 up to where the terminus of the bypass is.
And then come down where the bypass is to the sewer. And again, that'll be on a picture here.
Now, I thought when we put it through Belfair, they had to pay a bunch of money for the environmental part of it, though, the environmental right-of-way, or that was what it was explained from your predecessors.
I can't explain that, Commissioner. And I think we've got a pretty conservative cost estimate. We went over it with the staff from Bremerton as we were talking through the feasibility of this, and ultimately we increased the cost associated with the lift stations significantly because ultimately the SKIA area up there can produce up to 1 million gallons a day. So our lift stations that we're putting in the residential areas are never going to produce or deal with that volume of flow. So I think we're in the ballpark.
Another opportunity would be then to pump reclaimed water, purple pipe service back up to Puget Sound Industrial Center. So we would run a pipe for sewer coming down, and then we would run reclaimed water back up there and sell reclaimed water into the industrial park. That would be an additional $2.2 million and generate about $90,000 worth of revenue. Both of those are at market rates. The other option is to revisit the hookup holding tank requirements in Title 1303-030 to allow on-site septic systems for parcels more than 500 feet from existing sewer line and eliminate the quote moratorium. With binding site plans to hook up to sewer when the sewer line is available, and with the CFC payment made at time of application. So they would have the hookup on their property paid for so that when the sewer came by, it would be automatically hooked into. Okay, so what I have, if I may,
Wow.
that's a pretty plan. So, with GIS's help, and they were a great assistance in this, this is the UGA from about 35,000 feet. The boundaries of the UGA. Here's the proposed Belfair bypass, and Skia is, let it resize itself, is in this area here. Here's the Bremerton Airport, and the majority of the industrial park is here. However, they do have industrial park expansion designs into this area as well as into this area. Here's the Mason County boundary line. So the first proposal is to look at what is the Newkirk phase, I'm sorry, the old Belfair Highway phase. And the blue here is the current existing pipe in the Phase 1 area, or the old connection area. The pipe would then run up through, along the UGA boundary, and then into the River Hill development area.
That red line that he's showing, that's Newkirk Road.
This red line is Newkirk Road.
Yeah.
The other proposal, the old Roy Bode Road proposal, is to run it through this center of the of that component of the UGA, and deadhead it off in at the, I don't know if Newkirk, yeah, Newkirk runs up there, so deadhead it off at Newkirk. If I can put in parcels. Fantastic tool that they have. So these are the county parcels within that area. And the discussion around the old Roy Bode expansion was to take into consideration potential new development up in this area, as well as new development in this area. This is 125.
Yeah, I can't tell you, I haven't seen that plat, but it's something of that magnitude.
Yeah, it's on the plus 100 ERU, or 100 units.
Now, he already separated that out and stuff, didn't he?
I don't know. So this is $7.7 million. This was two,
3.5.
3.5
3.7,
million.
something like that.
yeah, $3.7 million for this phase. So these would be expansions into the old Belfair Highway, what we used to refer to as Phase 2.
Before you do that, you mind if I show the commission? When he came up with this idea and explained it, because I live there, I tell you, it was a brilliant idea, completely different. Because one of the problems you have trying to come down here, anybody knows, every time you do any of the road work there, it liquefies and basically costs a fortune to do any of the road work. It just gives away, there's so much wetlands and stuff through here. But one of the things here, this is all hillside. That's your industrial area up there. He'd be able to connect to them through gravity instead of pump stations. So if they bring it down to this, he could actually get it all the way through, and you can start to connect to the ones that are out on the highway, which is something we'd never even discussed until you came up with that. This also gets you to, this is the heavy densely populated area that I'm talking about, and that's the area again for the highest density of future building, except for here, which is high density, medium density, and I think that was ag.
Yes.
Yes, you got it right. Yeah.
So it actually goes right in front of the areas that could have the future potential. And again, that was just a great idea.
So here's
The yellow Highway 3.
No,
No,
that's
it's
the
the
railroad
railroad
track.
track.
Highway 3 is right here. This is Highway 3. So here are restricted development areas. So these are restricted by the county. Doesn't have too much of an impact. within the UGA, just outside the UGA. These are restricted due to riparian stream rights. We'll come back in a second. I hope. There it comes. So none of this would be developable, any of this that is green.
You kept the other one on there.
Yep, I'm just adding to it. These are not developable because they're wetlands. It'll take a second.
So the green they're showing on that, that's creek frontage?
Could be Eleanor Creek
The
or
creeks
Arlene
and
Creek.
buffers apply according to our code commissioner.
Okay.
And then you have floodplains added to that. Let me do the steep slopes at the same time. I'll have to wait.
Can I ask you a question about the cost estimate? Is part of the reduction in cost associated with road restoration? Because obviously it's going to be more expensive to restore what we've got on Old Belfair Highway than Roy Road. Is there a cost built into the estimate for restoration and road construction, or
In the old Belfair Highway,
the Roy Road option?
my Bart left. I can't tell you that, I
I'm
don't
just
recall.
curious how it was estimated, like if it was just a trench, I mean, that road's not in great shape already.
Well, where we are, we're
No, there-
primarily on
There is no,
driveways.
the Roybud Road one, there is no road there.
Yeah.
And
There's
there's
a road
no,
for a portion of it and then it stops.
Yeah.
And then, so yeah, I guess that would be the question, like, is it so cheap because it just goes off-road and?
Well, we've cut the length of pipe down considerably, but yes, it's more, we're gonna be going along property lines. There will be some driveways and stuff, so there will be restoration measures, but not to the same level of the old Belfair Highway.
Yeah, and the sewer goes down to the end of the county road there anyway.
Yeah, just about,
Yeah. And then it turns into dirt.
yeah.
so what we end up with here are then what is identified as the white area, which would be developable. And to
So
simplify
none of
that,
this is developable here?
The steep slopes, yeah.
So must be part in front of that. It's the high density, medium density, 'cause that's all flat land. The slope starts right at the end of those properties.
so let me get back to the baseline. And then add in the phases.
And Commissioner, if you notice, the shading for the blue area that they're calling Newkirk wraps around to that side and is actually kind of contiguous to that one piece of Newkirk. So maybe that was the basis for the name.
Let me back out and get back.
Well, if that, like I said, they had a battle at one point, the neighbors there with the developer. And I know all that was put away, that it wasn't going to bust through there, but originally everybody believed there was an access that took it through. So it would have made sure, it would have made sense to call Newkirk on that side, it would have. You also have a layer for satellite?
Actually, I do.
Frank, if you, just for,
So here's Belfair sewer phases.
I was gonna say, if you click on that, you know, the white through the brown section there, and so it delineates.
The white through the
Just
brown.
so on your left-hand menu, you scroll a little bit, you see right there, 0.82 goes to 0, just above that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we can do this.
If you do that, potential areas of future development,
This shows, this is the opposite, so we just showed you what couldn't be developed. this will be what we can develop and to what density. Let me take out the sewer phases. So the higher salmon color have higher density components. They can be up to 0.82%. And the lighter shades down to 0.25%. So this would have the highest density available to develop. This would be the lowest. The lower colors would be the lower density. So what this is attempting to do is to kind of get a pictorial vision of where Belfair may grow, where the county has via code developed a plan for it to grow, and then what are the natural features that will exclude the ability for it to grow, which would be wetlands, streams, steep slopes, and things of that nature. So continuing to zoom out, if I may for a moment, and take a look at the proposed run up to Skia. Because there are two components of that.
I noticed we didn't have the purple pipe on this one. Was it just that one you were showing? Or did we lose a pipe in the process of making the revision?
I don't recall.
Yeah.
Come back. Sometimes it goes off and does its own little thing. I mean, this is,
When you were talking to Ecology, since we're waiting for this, did they specify whether or not they will put in writing of any sort that they're not going to hold us responsible for any of those other agreements? Can we get them to do that?
They're gonna be here next Monday for a briefing.
so we can
with
have
you.
that conversation with them in regards
I'd
to.
love, even if we can get on record somehow, that'd be wonderful.
What other agreements?
Anything in the past was the idea, they said in the meeting, according to the newspaper, what Senator Sheldon put out there, that they said they're not gonna hold us to any of that stuff, where we agreed to do 1,800 septics and stuff like that in the past. I'd sure love for, since what was said in there may not have been 100% accurate over and over, I would love to actually have it in writing somewhere so they don't come back after the county later. Because in the past, in meetings they had expressed, they expected us to do that. So all we need to do is get somebody to say it in writing, and I think we'd be safe.
But Frank, you had taken a look at all of the loan agreements.
There's nothing in any of the loan agreements, any of the loan documents themselves that say that as a function of maintaining this loan, we have to do X numbers of hookups. What documentation that we have with the Department of Ecology are applications that suggest that we're going to have so many hookups and things of that nature. The only thing that might restrict us, and that's not the Department of Ecology, but maybe in the GMA or the UGA agreement, that says that as a function of developing this UGA, you will or you will not do A, B, C, or D. So we may end up coming out of having a review of that, maybe identifying something that says there's a hook in
But at the
there.
same time, we visited Ecology in the past, went with the past director and the person, the manager for the system and stuff. They explicitly told us they expected us to maintain and hold up our end of the bargain. And enough to where
Oops.
enough to where that had us pretty nervous in the idea that we had obliged ourselves to, that's one reason why the moratorium, not moratorium, can't use that, because we were supposed to make good on those numbers when we asked for that money and put it into our ask, that we were gonna give up 1,800 septics. So I just, it's easy to say these things, but I'd sure like to get something to where we're not
Yeah,
held.
and we can ask that of the Department of Ecology. The Department of Commerce was very forward and offered any assistance that we would ask of them as well. They were the ones that brought forward in that conversation the ability to do a UGA without septics.
What was the city they?
I think Gold Bar.
Yeah, that they had brought forward was that there are the opportunities out there currently in Washington that have designed UGAs with no septic whatsoever, and that they would help us towards that.
The ones that were telling us that we were expected to uphold that was Ecology, as they were doing the USDA, they were the ones representing them for the loans, and what was expected when they gave us the money. So, like I said, just to have somebody say that would just alleviate a lot of pressure for the future, if somebody changes their mind.
We had this is the northern piece of the bypass coming past the sewer plant itself. And this is two options that are being put forward in regards to hooking up to Skia, which is just north of this, which is to run the pipe alongside the railroad track, or to run it in conjunction with the Belfair bypass, run it up a little further on Route 3, and then run it into the Skia facility itself. I believe both of those options are about the same price.
There was about $200,000 difference in our estimates. Our reservation about using the Naval Railroad is we've got to get the Secretary of the Navy to sign off on it.
The
So
one in
that-
Washington DC.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would need to be, and that, it can occur, but it's,
But that and maintenance on it, it would be more ungainly to try to do maintenance on something you can't get access to than along the side of a major road.
Well, and practically speaking, we're gonna have a hole dug for a road to be built, right? So, I mean, it would kind of make sense to try and not duplicate,
Right.
right?
and we could have the conversation with the Department of Transportation to do, what do you call it, a scrub and.
Well, we were talking about doing clearing and grubbing. If they can agree on a preliminary alignment, maybe we could get in there and get clearing and grubbing done on this initial phase and allow us to come in after that and lay the pipes in the ground, and then as the funding and stuff gets worked out, or any final design issues for the bypass.
So we don't have to wait for the construction, we could ask them to do some preliminary work there and then run in right behind them with some pipe.
Jerry, would you expect if they were doing something like that, that they would run power through there also?
Along the bypass alignment, yes, sir. I think it's gonna be imperative to provide power into that area. You've got power lines going through there down at the southern portion of it, but that's not where they're gonna get their power. I would guess that the power is gonna come in and loop through down to the southern end and maybe set back, maybe buried, I have no idea.
Why? What did you need it for?
For all the development that's gonna occur up
Okay, so it's
there.
not a need of DOT.
No, it's gonna be a need for whatever development occurs in there. And presently, there aren't any power lines back there. We've got power at the plant. I have no idea where it comes from. I think it came up off Romance Hill ultimately, but I really haven't paid attention to that when I was back there.
I know there are some big transformers out there, but I don't know if they go under the tracks.
Are there any other visual cues that, or looks here in regards to this?
Yeah, if you could do the satellite.
Oh,
What we didn't get on that, we had on it this morning, and I asked them to change the colors, where you see the green pipe going up and then going north, that goes up to the lagoon. That's at the Port of Bremerton property. We also had a purple line on there representing the purple pipe, and that would just go up to the immediate airport area for their distribution as they need to.
Side by side, isn't it?
Just about. You'd have separation still, but basically it'd be a side-by-side construction.
so this is the satellite view. This is the airport itself. This is, what is that, the log road?
Log yard, yeah.
Log Yard Road. This is
Like Flora.
Lake Flora. This is Route 3. and this is the county boundary. This is the route up alongside the railroad tracks. And then this would be the sewer pipe up to Skia along the bypass.
See, I knew on that one area that was showing, not able to develop because of the steep slope. They actually have a very large facility right there. That's, you can't see it from the highway, it's down. Trucking area and buildings.
Is that big house that's back there?
No, I think it's a
Oh, landing area?
Yeah, it's more than that. They have big buildings and trucks and they lease them out and stuff. Large buildings down there.
So, let's see, how do I get back up to full size?
Right there. There you go.
There we go. So the next steps that were developed in the old plan were to develop a financial plan that puts the utility in positive cash flow, position utility rates to be competitive in residential and industrial marketplace, unite, and this was a conversation that was going on at that time, which was to unite all county utilities into one management group to standardize management rates and costs. Review options to sell all or some of the positive running utilities. The decisions at that time were to add phases 2, 3, and 4, hold the ERU rates at $99 for the 10 years, modify the hookups to that revised schedule, 5,000, 10,000, and then up from there. Do an internal bond to do financing for the loan refinancing and the BOSS settlement, as well as seed money for funding the construction. Utilize an internal fund bond. Utilize internal funding for seed funding to do phases 2, 3, and 4. Maintain the ERU rates at $99 and utilize 09 funds $450 and REIT 2 funds of $150 for 12 years. The recommendations were to fund the BOSS settlement with the internal fund bond, establish a CFC prepayment program for 10 years instead of the ULID proposal, establish a countywide sewer and utility district and a community utility advisory committee, utilize the land grid to expand sewer services to Sandhill, Lynch, and Beards Cove regions, review reclaimed water utilization, and review yearly the status of the plan to actual and adjust rates accordingly. So coming back to today, the next steps are to meet with the Department of Ecology next week to discuss their financing and their financing options. Review the takeaways from today's proposals and massage them to what might be a developing plan. I'll meet the week of March 13th to discuss the final review of the revised Belfair sewer plan, which I now understand we need to push a week. So that'll be the week of March 20th. And then review options for the Russellwood sewer. And generally, theirs is much simpler. The Russellwood sewer plan revision or sewer plan needs to take a look at where we are today as far as O&M costs are concerned and what is our rate structure, and is the rate structure strong enough to support the O&M costs, or do we need to do something with O&M costs, reducing them to match what the rate structure is for the utility? And then questions.
Frank, is there any option that we've identified here today that does not require loans in some way, shape, or form?
Any construction options, no. All of them require some sort of financing assistance, whether it be, as well as capital components, matching fund from the county. We can build into the cost structure of a proposal to run up to SKIA a revenue deferral program with them to say, if you help with the financing of the spur running up to you, we would defer revenue costs, ERU costs to your service for some period of time. And that would be an economic analysis that we could look at for them to cost share the cost of running the pipe up to them. Their own proposals look at spending upwards of $30 million in 2 phases, probably 15 each, to put in 2 sewers to meet their own demands. So they do have identified sewer cost, construction costs that they would be incurring for themselves, that we may be able to leverage off of
They
and
also,
garner some assistance in financing. I'm
excuse
sorry.
me, they also may have access to funding sources that we don't. And there's nothing that should preclude them from participating with a capital outlay to get this thing built.
But any proposed expansion would require, any other proposed expansion, Old Belfair Highway or the Roy Bode would require funding and financing internally with loans from either DOE or USDA or both. Debt service, reduction in debt service can only be accomplished by either additional forgiveness of loans or debt, or through refinancing the debt service either with DOE or with a long-term general obligation bond, or in conjunction with financing under USDA to do some expansion.
In the beginning, you mentioned 450,000 was the cost on the 09 and the meat stuff. When we first started our first year, we had to kick in 800,000 to make that first year when they found, where'd that money come from? Or did you not go back that far?
I did, I do have it somewhere, I don't recall honestly where it came from. I do remember it was 800 and I
Yeah.
believe it was 850.
850 is what I remember
Yeah.
as well.
We might have had current expense because we had a fund balance.
But I don't recall where it came from, I could find out. Do you recall? No.
I do remember, I know we subsidized it a lot more than what we have down here, and doing that for a few years.
I may be able to.
In the plan which you have in front of you, the 1.3 million and change, that was on the premise of getting 85% grant, as had happened in the past. The past constructions were done at 85% grant, 15%.
Yeah, that was, the original plan assumed an 85%.
Yeah, and if it was any more than that, then no plan was gonna work anyway.
So our O&M costs holding somewhat steady now.
Actually, I think they're improving. We're fixing some of the problems we've had that added to the O&M costs.
Okay.
And as we get this stuff taken care of, hopefully it'll stabilize a little bit. there.
Last I remembered, we were assuming about $1 million a year O&M.
It was around $900,000 a year, but it's dropped down to about 400. Currently, it's around 300. That's why I'm saying it's
But a conservative estimate would be about 400, is that correct?
on the 450, somewhere in there.
And Frank, on that 800,000, it was .09. So it's actually a loan
I thought so.
originally in 2007,
Yeah.
and then we gave a loan in 2010 from the .09 fund,
Okay.
and also awarded another 200,000 in 2010.
Yep, that's what I remember. So that number is much greater.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Now, I do recall at the meeting with Senator Sheldon, his comment around being able to, well, not being able to do the 1.5 million again this capital cycle. We're having difficulty with that, so I don't think that we could plan for that.
And we never did though.
Is anybody planning for that?
I didn't include it here.
Yeah.
It had been mentioned a few times, I just wanted to bring it up. At
We never
that
put
meeting,
it
he
in
thought,
anything, I remember, did we?
yeah,
And
no.
we didn't put it in our yearly plan either, did we?
That's correct.
Okay.
So the opportunity for that may not be this year. His comment was that, it might be able to come forward in the next years.
And Commissioner, one of the reasons why I'm pushing on this idea of getting something in writing, as you can see, we go to those meetings, I attended one just like that when I first started. And you have their biggest boss there that doesn't actually usually have all the knowledge of what happens on the ground. And there was a lot of things that were said at that time, and we go to find out they're not accurate. One of them is, we've been through before several times, is they don't restructure the loans. And the thing on the moratorium, we've been through that several times. If you can't subdivide, you can't build a house because technically the word moratorium is not accurate because there's a definition for it, that you have to go through these processes. But the truth is, they haven't been able to build out there for years in the urban growth area where we wanted to build. So we can't get past the 1% growth because we have to have takedown and build up. I'd like to have somebody say it right, because again, when we went to ecology with the folks that were before him, they told us straight out that they expect us, because they're the ones that were handling those loans for the USDA, and like that it was federal, they won't restructure, they won't do anything. They had expectations of us to follow through with what we had told them. So as times change and they say different things, just like they said in that room, we're finding out some of them are inactive, but if we can get somebody to actually say we're not held liable, it'd be nice to be able to carry that on to the next one in case we go into another room and they say you are. That's all I'm saying on that. It would help us immensely if we knew for a fact we did not have to worry about that being hung over our head.
Well, I know Gary Setner and Sally,
Greg.
Craig Setner and Sally Titoff Tardoff are going to be here on Monday to follow the conversation so that we can ask them specifically and directly about those items, as well as what other future potential hurdles we may have or opportunities they may be able to present to us. But in conversation with Jeff Nedgley, that's a tough one. He's steering us to USDA for financing. Not that they couldn't, but if we were to leverage using USDA, they, as a function of whatever we do in expansion, might be able to take those loans and refinance them out to 30 or 40 years. Which could be done through the
Bonding as
long-term
well,
general obligation bond as well. I don't know if we can do 40 years, but I thought he said
You
35.
can't get out pretty far anymore. But USDA is, probably a good resource, because a lot of times they'll have grants attached to some of that as well, so maybe,
But not as good as Department of Ecology.
yeah.
But they do have grants and they do have forgivable loans as well.
But that was with expansion. We need to find a way to overcome the debts we have. The expansion stuff, the whole idea of looking to go north is the idea that the state would be covered, or the city of Bremerton, because they're going to be needing their sewer system. They're going to have to build something or something. It would make no sense for us to pay for that and, not recoup it and get loans on it.
I don't think anybody's suggesting that. I mean, I haven't heard that as part of the discussion at all. I mean, I even think they're amenable to that. I mean, I think they realize that at some point, in order to get services, they're gonna need to pay someone. And the city of Bremerton has said they don't wanna do it. Port Orchard has backed out. I mean, so they're kind of, so I don't think it's the port looking to get, kind of a free lunch.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is if we were to take out loans to be able to recoup things, that would mean that we're taking out the loan.
I understand that.
And I don't want to take out the loan.
And
first.
we could leverage
But
off
I
of
mean,
that.
everything involves a loan.
Right.
So at some point, if you expand, because when we look at this, we see that there is very little land left, or very little hookup potential left currently, which isn't gonna solve the problem either. So we've kind of found ourselves in this position where we have to expand somewhere. And the three options that are in front of us, Old Belfair Highway, Roy Bode, or Skia, all involve some sort of financing because we just don't have the money. So we have to see, we have to look at that and put that all together and say, okay, well, where is there gonna be a potential offset for the debt that we have to take on because we don't have the cash? And if SKIA remains an option, that would probably be the only place that we could find a partnership that would include somebody else helping with the cost.
Do you think we could get them to roll our debts into their financing? Is that what you're saying, or?
I'm saying that that is the only option that involves another partner that can find funding on their own.
For the cost of the expansion.
The cost of expansion, but not for us.
The
to-
current
Right.
debt service.
But there seems to be an opportunity that we could look at with USDA when we go out to do our side of things
Correct.
to roll everything together potentially.
And do
Is that the way?
debt service expansion.
We haven't talked to
Sure.
RD at this time.
Mhm.
Phone call came this morning. What I asked Jeff to do was to schedule some time next week for he and the individual at RD and myself to sit down and figure out how we can package this and what we can do. So I'll know more about it next week,
The
hopefully.
essential question is who's taking out the loan?
I understand that.
That's what I'm hearing here.
Yes. And we will be able to come back for the meeting on the 20th of March with some of the details, I hope,
Hopefully.
from
So-
that meeting with USDA.
Has anybody had this, or is there discussion on when those conversations will happen with the city of Bremerton regarding the financing of this? Or are we still waiting for the design monies and to go through
Go ahead.
I would make the distinction, Port of Bremerton as opposed to the city of Bremerton. And no, we haven't talked to the port. I think the port is the one that's gonna be looking at, actually picking up the tab on this one way or the other. And how we can put together a team approach on this that would allow us the ability to refinance our loans, I have no clue. But this is a discussion to have with RD. Also, I talked to Commerce a while back, and there is a small trailer court adjacent to the far end of the Port of Bremerton. Low-income trailer court. And the lady from Commerce said, if you can pick up that, we're qualifying for another package.
$750,000 fits the CBDG. That's what I noted from the documentation
Okay.
a lot about CBDG and low income and infrastructure to support low income.
But the problem with that scenario is though, that's if they even are interested, because you cannot force a trailer park to hook up. So they'd have to want to, and since they're not on one now, I have a feeling it's a pretty low-end trailer park. I have a feeling it'd be hard pressed for them to pay $100 more a month per stall. They're pretty
And there's a
low-end.
pretty extensive run to go from where we would
That's
be
true.
running the
Well,
sewer and
actually-
up Route 3.
As the port would expand their facilities, they'll essentially be pretty much across the road from that.
Okay,
So I'd like to share with you guys some of the conversations that I've had with up north up there. The port commission is different on how they're looking at it. You have one port commissioner that flat doesn't want it at all, okay? You have another one that's pretty interested, and another one that is in the wait and see, let's see what we need. And the last conversation I had, which was 2 days ago, his thing is, even though I know it's a third, he thinks he has 50% capacity still available. It's not on a desperate need for them at the moment. Now, the city of Bremerton, on the other hand, sees another building, another company coming in within 2 years. They'd like to get this thing going, so they have a deeper investment in it as well. So it's going to be a combination of all of them. Now, I'm talking to the port commissioner, he's willing to go aboard if it's financially feasible for them. So to me, that means he's not interested in spending $7 million himself, but if we get him close, then maybe we can get the rest of the park from the port itself, or a combination of the port and the city. But it's all premised on what our legislators, or how they're able to help us to get this next part, to get that seed money get started. If we can get started, I think we can maybe get more out of them to pay for it and get us hooked up. But again, literally, this wouldn't even be an option if it hadn't been for certain legislators. And I'm going to give Drew McEwen a pat on the back on that, because he's the one that actually has been sitting down and been trying to make something happen on that. The other ones are coming along and trying to help, but he's got the forefront on that one.
Yeah, the Port of Bremerton is looking at least a $15 million investment in order for them to put the first phase of their sewer
First
program
phase, yeah.
in. With expansion, 10, 15, 20 years from now, they would need to put another $15 million. With a pipe, we could give that complete
Yeah.
expansion availability to them without having them build the infrastructure for it.
Well, at least the first half of it.
And I was gonna say, that plan was just for the actual facility. It didn't count on piping to a business that might be on the county line.
For them.
Yeah, for them.
Yeah,
So they would
that's
have
just the
another,
plant.
yeah, they would have another bid.
Yeah, they would have to incur additional construction costs to put pipe into the ground above and beyond just the sewer facility.
And Commissioner Schu's right, my last talk to Port Orchard, he was pretty adamant that, the mayor was pretty adamant that they have no interest in it. They did have an agreement in the past, but nobody wants to spend that kind of money to get out there to recoup that little bit.
Did you get the letter from Port Orchard?
Mm-mm.
Well, they provided us with a letter that we attached to the legislative request. And it was most eloquent, and basically they indicated that the facilities in Belfair was by far the best choice available.
Because you have a scenario where Port Orchard is about, what, 7 miles out, and then Bremerton's 5 miles, and then there's some extensive
Yeah.
requirements to go to either one of those.
Plus, they went on to advocate that we need the effluent,
Yeah.
and this is kind of a win-win. I was really impressed with the letter.
So next steps are review what we have as options. We're going to have the meeting with the Department of Ecology next Monday. The following Monday, we'll regroup and come up with recommendations that either we can go back to fine tune some financial analysis around, and then continue on with putting the plan together.
I guess I want to talk to the gentleman here about lifting the moratorium through allowing septics.
Please?
I feel like if we do the work of requiring a CFC prepay, that the laterals are in the ground on the binding site plan, to do all those things, even a large on-site maybe even, and then requirements that within 500 feet hookup, at least we can allow building in our urban growth area, with the thought of the SKIA line being another side of things. So I think both of those could go separately without
Absolutely.
impacting each other. I'm hearing, I don't know if I hate to predict what you're saying, but I'm hearing, I think, not a lot of interest in more debt. And I personally am okay with memorializing our agreed to and .09 payments to the existing debt service, to as long as we need to show that this is the source of debt service payment for us. I don't know how successful the prepay of the CFCs has been or would be. It hasn't really been advertised, but.
We haven't allowed it.
Okay. But I feel like if we continue to come back with opportunities and options, especially if people within, landowners within the urban growth area have options of start thinking about building. We got 900 jobs apparently coming to the shipyard, the markets might be heating up. I feel like if we can start with at least the 3 options of memorialize our debt service payments as they exist in our lift the moratorium, allow some building, even large on-site, that's something worth checking. And then keep going, working the SKIA route. Those would at least get us moving for a while to solvency. Not solvency, but at least we're not going backwards.
Moving the needle a little bit.
Yeah, especially if our own can stay at 450.
So Dave, could you bring back language that we can start to get that process moving forward? Because I don't want to end up where we're in a situation where, like here on page 16, problems with the plan, never implemented. That's kind of it's a dead end right away. So, if we can start bringing forward language that we can then move on to the PAC and have them consider, and then go through that process.
Yeah.
Well, there's another part I'd like to tack on with what the commissioner was saying too, though. Lifting the moratorium and doing that language would be huge, because at least we could start to grow, and if we ever do get go down another road, we'll have the ability to have more to hook up to. We can't get anything to hook up to if we don't allow it. One of the things that we had, and I like the idea of the prepaid facility charges, we had talked about that before, but we need to follow through hopefully with what we had discussed in the plan before, which was lowering the original hookup rate, at least for a 2-year period, down to 5,000, so we can spur the growth and get those multifamily units online that have been waiting for us.
Oh, yes, I forgot about that.
If we could do that and allow that for 2 years, I know that we have 2 of them right now that are looking, and one of them is willing to expand again. If we were to set up some type of thing where they can borrow money to do it, or pay, they'll even buy more. But I told her if that was even created, you wouldn't get the money back, you'd have to build more units. But, 'cause I don't want to be a bank, I don't think it's good for the county to be a bank, and, yeah, the treasurer, no, we're not gonna. So I think that'd be huge. If we could even just do that, we can at least spur the growth that's needed to start moving things forward.
Well, and happy news, I did make an offer to someone to come on board today as our planning manager, so.
Great. Okay.
So I do have one follow-up question, and this would be in regards to refinancing. Do we want to continue looking at the options put forward by bond counsel for LTGO refinancing of this debt, or do we want to first look at the opportunity of what we want to do with the plan? Do we want to do expansion, and can we leverage refinancing out of an expansion proposal?
Before I would even want to ask that, when you were telling us about the conversation on refinancing with them, you were a little bit vague. I'd like to know if it's not, if there's any possibility that's open that maybe this person doesn't know. I'd like for them to tell us no, because if it is a yes, we can do it at 1%, we can do it out. All it takes is for somebody to say it can happen and allow us to do it, just like it takes for somebody to say it can't. So I'd love to get a definite answer on that one. And
Okay.
at least
So
ask them
I will
straight out,
talk to
yes or
Gary and
no.
have him come prepared, Settner from DOE, to come prepared with a definitive yea or nay.
I think we also probably should have a look at the rates in order for us to build up at the very least a reserve. We can't get it through CFC prepays, but we do need to take a look at the rates well, I don't remember what the number is we wanted in reserve, but they're pretty small now.
Well, the plan had originally proposed to start putting like $50,000 away in reserve. Reserves in a function for capital reserves. Reserves as a function of operating cash flow should be around 90 days worth of cost.
Okay, well, at least start there.
Yeah. Well,
And then move towards another one that, I mean, if we end up not tapping it, at least we've got match money.
And the problem we have with the plan on the 50,000, that was 50,000 per year, but the problem we have is if we're not expanding, then none of that's there. There is no money there, so we'd have to look at
So if
what
we're
we do.
getting prepaid CFCs, that might help with that.
That will help if we keep that separated, that'd be, especially in the beginning, and if we offer it to the public, I'm not sure how that would work, because unless we have direct plans to move somewhere. But if you offer it to the public, that's not other early money that.
Yeah, it's a hard one if they don't know where we're going.
But we know the price will go up, so if we knew where we're going for sure.
Okay.
Can I?
Lisa, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
I do, on page 34, when we was talking about recommendations and utilizing internally funded bonds or internal loans. We don't have any,
Cash to do any of that?
so.
That's off the table.
That's off the table,
Yeah.
These are recommendations from.
From 2015.
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Lisa, do we know?
The green art is the 2015, the blue, that's why I made such a change. So the blue is this current status, and the green was what we discussed in 2015.
Since our last conversation with bond counsel, do we know what's happened with the rates at all?
He sent us, he sent Frank and I a proposal Just looking at those.
I didn't see any rate changes in
Yeah, I
the,
didn't
from the
see any
previous
changes
one.
in that either.
So at the moment, it's flat, but I think the long-term market is saying there's going to be at least 2 more rate hikes this year, or that's what the market is building into, building itself into, is that there are going to be, at some point, 2 more rate hikes at a 25 basis point increase this year.
I did speak with Alan this morning, actually, or yesterday morning, and explained that we had a series of meetings over the next few weeks to discuss the plan, and would hopefully have some information
To get back to him with.
to go back to him with.
Now, if we do allow, we still should have some conversation somewhere about how to handle multifamily. Because right now it'd be 1 ERU per unit, because there's nothing in the code for anything
Oh,
different.
yeah.
So,
We don't have a code
now, we talked
for,
about
a
it,
rate for,
but we never, as far as I know, we never put one into place, and they never put one in place before us.
okay, so we need
multifamily.
a different ERU rate for,
For multifamily dwelling.
plus, I think that we need to keep our eyes on septic health in the phase 2 area. And I'd love for us to be able to be watching, first of all, compliance with the every 3-year septic maintenance reporting, because if we don't keep our eye on that piece, I hate to see, lots and lots of failures happening
And not have pipe up there.
My concern is less with that area than with the areas to the west.
Yeah.
That's where you have high
Beards
density.
and Lynch Cove, just down the
Beards and
North
Lynch
Shore.
Cove.
That's
Yeah.
where all the homes are,
Realize
that's
the
where,
land reduce.
well, that's where all the contaminants started in the
From a
first
public,
place.
from a
That's
public
where-
health perspective, that's the area of concern.
Yeah.
The area that's like Old Belfair Highway in that vicinity, the densities right now are low enough, they're far enough from from Hood Canal. My concern levels are lower. But it's where we have those, urban densities without urban services that we could have problems. And
Do we know if
particularly
we
with
do
nitrates.
have problems?
What's that?
Do we know if we do have problems?
We haven't seen any nitrate issues with the wells yet, so. And that would be the first thing I would expect to see is the nitrate levels go up.
A lot of homes right there in that hill.
One of the problems is you have a lot of these small lots that, they're started as recreational lots, they've built, larger homes on them, and now have paved places so that the reserve areas are gone. So whether we do anything with sewer or whether the homeowners association starts to buy some of those lots back and does set aside for large on-site septic systems, that may be a solution for them, but it doesn't help us in particular. But that's, from a public health point of view, that is a way of dealing with it.
One of the questions that I do want to throw back out there that just came to mind, this came up in that conversation in Olympia, was that if we do decide to modify the UGA, we need to be cautious, and because if we do decide to modify and have plans in works to do expansions, any lawsuit that's brought about by the modification of the UGA will put a halt to any expansion, financing, design, or assistance from DOE or from the Department of Commerce.
That's why I can't wait to see the stuff you found, Commissioner, because the issue I have is wondering how the Growth Management Hearings Board would look at the idea of taking out one of the largest population density area out of the growth area.
Well, when we
Yeah,
talk,
so I haven't, go ahead.
when we talked to Commerce and Ecology, Commerce was saying, you can always shrink it. That's a fairly easy process to shrink it. Problem is that when you eventually have to go back the other direction, that's when it gets to be sticky. And their suggestion was to leave as is, and then just address that through your comp plan.
But do you think that if you try to take the population densities out, that's where the lawsuit would go? Because the lawsuits we used to have in the
Well-
past weren't Commerce after us, it was John Deal and what's his
Well,
name?
But that's what, any citizen can bring forward a
Right.
lawsuit that would put a halt to any
Right.
activity, phases, or
So
construction.
we basically, if we shrink it, we then, population area would have to be accounted for in another UGA.
You have to swap.
You have to do a swap.
Steve, is there an evaluation of rezone taking place, like based on this work that Loretta had done by the first stormwater consultant? It looks like there's some real opportunities to rezone the areas that are developable. Is there any process, or is there a way to get started looking at that?
It
Like
should
if
be-
there's something like really low density, up on the hill, for instance, is super developable and it's, you know.
What is that zone
Up on the hill is all industrial and commercial.
Right.
It's not even commercial, it's
up
industrial.
there? They should all be zoned for urban densities already.
But the question that I'm wondering is, we're looking at changing our usage, going from allowed use to not allowed use. If this is something that would be handled through that process, because I've been looking into it since our conversation, and even looking for some help from outside entities to see which ones are the best counties that we would like to start with looking at instead of getting the bad ones first. I wonder how much of that would occur in that process. I don't know. I've been trying to figure that out, because we never get anything
How
else
much
on
would
the plan.
upzoning would happen, or?
Yeah, because we probably have to change people's zoning,
Not necessarily.
no?
And I didn't mean up on the hill where like Log Yard Road is, I mean along the ridge, basically. Like there's a ton of, like the green area that could be.
Yeah, that's
looked at
green because of the
potential
ownership,
zoning.
it's in long-term commercial forest.
Yeah.
It's something we kind of, that's up to the owner.
Well, it's
Yeah,
green
we
in
have
this
to-
because
Can
it's
we do
developed
it?
in
No,
that
but it
area.
is zoned up there too, there's an underlying zoning on it, but I don't remember
There
what
is.
it is,
I
because
think
there's no access to it at this point. We're
Right.
hoping to
but
have access.
That's
but-
all the property that's shown as undeveloped, unconstrained, is that big piece. So
Yeah.
I didn't know if there was any plan to look at the potential to rezone.
I'll bet you they are.
Year after the bypass.
Yeah,
goes in,
I bet you they are, no, I bet you're looking at it now. Because up there, PUD just bought a big piece up there, and we own a big piece up there.
Okay, so we'll be back Monday morning.
Thank you, commissioners, for allowing me to be a part of this. Again, it was crazy what had happened. I was literally only a mile and a half from the crest, but we went off because we got stuck. We had to stop for 2.5 hours on the freeway, just not move. And then when they finally let it go, you had all these trucks, everybody trying to get to an area that hadn't been used for I don't know how many hours. And then we pulled off to try and go to the restroom, and we went to get back on to try and make sure they were actually falling into each other and jackknifing, and it was like, okay, yeah, we're done. So we turned around, we had to drive 35 miles in the snow backwards to get to Cleveland to find a place to stay.
The commissioners, you have briefing tomorrow.
We have a briefing tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.